To the second lecture of GIS. Let me share my screen so that you can see the presentation. The recording has started. Okay. So do you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. All right.
Yes,
Thanks
sir.
for the confirmation. All right. And did you go through this video that I asked you to do? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we will come back to this video. We will talk about this video later on when we will be talking about overlay and the ideas of GIS. But for now, let's continue with our usual lecture. So, okay, tell you what, let me talk a little bit about this video. So Jan Maghart, he is, I think, the father of landscape architecture. And so before we start playing with computers, that means we start using GIS in computers. What Jan Maghart did was he drew different categories in the on piece of papers. For example, tracing papers, that is see-through papers, and then he overlaid. He put one paper on top of another paper, and then another, and then another. He made one stack of such categories of papers. Okay, and then he found out that which areas are most suitable for some development, for construction of a path or a street. Okay, which actually satisfies both stakeholders. And the stakeholders were the environmentalists and then the civil engineers. Okay, so it was one of the early uses of GIS without having access to any technology. Okay, without having access to any GIS software or any computer, just based on the papers. The history of GIS is actually even older than Jan Maghart. We will talk about that in when we will be talking about the history. But before we talk about history, let's talk about data and information. If you can recall from Unit 2207, Informatics for Disaster Management, in that course as well, we talked about data and information. And then to define data in that course, we say, if you can recall, we say data is some raw information, that is something that is collected in raw form. And then when you process that information, that raw substance or raw entity, and then it gives us some sense, okay, it makes some sense to us, that is information. That means you yourself is a data. And then when I take a photo of you, that photo contains some properties of you. That means you have two eyes, you have hair, or you do not have hair. And then your face is round or something else. And then you have two eyes, you have nose, ears, and so on. Okay. Then the color of your skin maybe, and so on. So all that photograph becomes information, whereas you yourself, the raw entity, is the data. Okay, that's how we defined it in that course. But when we come to spatial science in GIS, it's very much similar, but a little bit different. Okay, so in GIS, the data is some attributes that is collected from an entity, object, or element, which are located somewhere. That means which has some locational information. Okay, so you have something. I mean, in real world, there is something. Let's say in real world, there is BUP. Or in real world, in front of BUP, there is one playground. Okay, between Monpura Lake and BUP, you have this lawn. And in that lawn, we have multiple species of grasses, or we have multiple species of vegetation. And then what you do is you go with a GPS and you start collecting the coordinates of these species. That means you are collecting the location of this species. So you are collecting two information. One is the locational information, and you are also collecting the attribute, that means information on the species. Because you see, side by side, you are collecting coordinates, pair of coordinates, latitude, longitudes, for one specific species. And then you move to the next location, you find another species, and then you also collect the locational information, that is latitude and longitude of that species as well. And then you gather all the information together. Okay, so you have a table of different digits and texts. So digits are latitude and longitude in two columns, and another column containing the information on the species. Okay, so let's say you have a mango tree, you have a jackfruit tree, you have a banyan tree, then you have other flower plants on the lawn. So you have collected there 30 locations, and then you had, let's say, 4 species. So you have 30 different entities for their locations, and you have 4 species distributed within these 30 entries. So this is data, just text form. Okay, this is data. And then what you do is you bring out this data into your software, into GIS software, then you present this data in a map. Now that is information. By looking into the map, you instantly know where a certain species are. Okay, the moment you see the map, you can identify where the mango trees are or where the jackfruit trees are. So now you can go and get some mangoes and jackfruits and enjoy it. Okay, but by looking into the latitude and longitudes, by looking into the attributes of the species, you cannot really identify the location of these species. You cannot find out where the mango trees are. Okay, because in real world, you do not really see this latitude and longitude. So another quick example could be like this. You see, these are just numbers, different columns. So one column, then another column, then another column, then another column. When we look into this information, we do not really know what they are. One thing we know that this one is barley, that's for sure. But then rest, we do not know. We cannot comprehend. Okay, so the first one, this could be longitude, this could be latitude. Yes, but the rest we do not know, because this data doesn't contain any header. These columns do not have any header. So these columns, we do not know what is this column for, we do not know what is this column for, and so on. However, when we input all this information, or when we bring all these numbers into GIS software, then we represent them using a map. And then maybe from this map, we categorize a certain column. Let's say if this is, let me see. So I'm looking for some big deviations. Let's say that this one is containing their yield. Yield মানে তো বোঝো যে ফসল কিরকম ফলন হয়েছে. Okay, so this one, let's say this information, this 001.16, 2.35, this information contains how the amount of yield in 2003. So when we categorize these values, and then we make, let's say, 6 categories based on these values, these entries, then in our map we have some representation of this sort, which are color coded, obviously, and then we can easily make some legends for each category. And then now, by looking at this map, which is have any knowledge of that particular location, or we do not possess any knowledge to solve any problem. Okay. Whereas if it's in Bangladesh, let's say we are in Dhaka, so every day we're roaming around in Dhaka, so we know a little bit about Dhaka. So whenever there is a waterlogging problem or flooding, we can always have some knowledge about it. We know that the flood doesn't really happen in Dhaka, it's always waterlogging. Okay. And the floods that are seen in Dhaka, they are outside of urban area. So I can tell this information, I can share this information, I can tell it to others, okay, based on my knowledge. But the knowledge that I have, the personal experiences that I have on a particular location or issues or problems, I cannot really share it with others. I mean, I cannot take out my brain and give it to someone else and ask him or her to absorb all the knowledges and experiences that I have. I cannot do that. So it's somewhat, again, difficult to share. However, these can be shared through written media, through different articles, when you publish or when you write a book. So to some degree, they can be shared, but they cannot be shared completely, 100%. And then you have all these knowledges, you have all these experiences, and based on these knowledges and experiences, what you do is now you start to make decisions. Okay, you start to develop your policies. You say that, okay, this is how these things happen, so we should do such things to prevent these occurrences. Okay, so you start writing different policies, which is, accepted by other stakeholders. That means other peoples or group of peoples involved into the process. So that is called wisdom. So that means it's sort of very similar to sympathy, empathy, and compassion. So sympathy is you are seeing someone suffering and you just say, oh, he's suffering or she's suffering. And the empathy is feeling the way that person is suffering. Okay, empathizing the way he or she is suffering. So that is empathy. And then compassion is based on this empathy. Now you are taking some actions. You're acting based on the empathy. So that is compassion. So just similar way, you have seen the evidence, and based on multiple evidence in a particular place, now you gathered your experiences and you develop your knowledge. You have the knowledge on that place or issue. And over the time, now you want to act out based on your knowledge. You gathered some wisdom, you developed some wisdom, okay? And it's only you who would understand the problems and who would be able to develop a policy or develop a plan, okay? It's only you. I cannot replicate your plan 100% without seeing your plan. I cannot get into your head. Okay, so the way, let's say, let Professor Jamilur Reza Chaudhary, the way he would suggest a policy or suggest a plan, maybe I will never be able to suggest the plan in a similar way, or I might not have the ability to look from his perspective until I'm being told about that perspective. That is wisdom. And this part of wisdom is it's a matter of question. Is it really possible to share, or is it impossible to share? Okay, so all this, yes.
স্যার উইজডমটা কি আমাদের ডেটা ইনফরমেশন এভিডেন্স নলেজ এগুলোর উপরে বেস করেই কি লাস্ট যে আমরা পলিসি বা কিছু একটা ডেভেলপ করি এটাই বোঝায়?
এটাই এক্স্যাক্টলি যেমন ধরো you have been working in Dhaka for a long time, okay, or you have been working in okay, let's talk about Baki sir. So Baki sir have been working on coastal region for quite some time, and he had been working on, or has been still working on, cultural geography, right? So whenever we go to any shelter, maybe he would know more than us about how people would behave. He could predict the behavior of people, or how the shelters should be constructed. So that is knowledge. okay, because he developed some sort of personal knowledge based on his experiences and based on multiple studies. So ekhane evidence mane hocche study. So all these things, but then government hires to develop a master plan for cyclone shelters. So now Pakistan is developing some plan or developing some policies how the shelter should be or shouldn't be. Now that is wisdom. That is totally depends on his knowledge, and that is totally depends on his decision making. Okay, so উনার উইজডমের উপরে বেস করে এখন উনি উনার বিভিন্ন পলিসি থেকে শুরু করে সবকিছু উনি এখন বানাচ্ছেন। তো উনি যেভাবে বানাবেন আমরা কিন্তু সেভাবে হয়তো চিন্তা করতে পারবো না, বিকজ আওয়ার উইজডম, নো ওয়ানস উইজডম ইজ ইকুয়াল। আমার কথা কি বুঝতে পেরেছো? সো নলেজ লেভেল সবার হয়তো ইকুয়াল হতে পারে। সাম থিংস ইউ মাইট নো এন্ড আই কুড নো। আমার কথা কি বুঝতে পেরেছো? সো একটা জিনিস তুমি যে পরিমাণ জানো আমি হয়তো সেই পরিমাণ জানতে পারি, বাট ওই যে জানার উপরে বেস করে যে একটা অ্যাকশনে যখন আমি যাচ্ছি তখন আমি যে সার্টেন পার্সপেক্টিভ থেকে কথা বলছি, এই পার্সপেক্টিভ কিন্তু তোমার নাও থাকতে পারে। আবার তুমি যে পার্সপেক্টিভ থেকে বলছো আমি ওই পার্সপেক্টিভ হয়তো ক্যাচ নাও করতে পারি, আনলেস আই ওয়াজ বিং এক্সপ্লেইনড দ্য পার্সপেক্টিভ। তো পার্সপেক্টিভ যখন তুমি এক্সপ্লেইন করছো তখন আমার কাছে ক্লিয়ার হচ্ছে, বাট আমি নিজে কিন্তু ওই পার্সপেক্টিভটা ডেভেলপ করতে পারছি না। So that is wisdom. So what I did, my explanation on this table is to somewhat, I would say, a little bit complex. Go through the book, Longley et al., the textbook that I have already posted on Teams. In that book, the explanation is quite simple. So why did I explain it in a complex way? Because so that there is no gap between the book and the teaching that we are going through.
স্যার, যদি আমাদের পলিসিতে কোনো প্রবলেম থাকে বা আমাদের উইজডমে কোনো প্রবলেম থাকে তাহলে মেইন প্রবলেমটা কি আমাদের ডেটা কালেকশনে ছিল?
No, not like that. So look, data collection হচ্ছে প্রতিটা ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল ইনস্ট্যান্সের জন্য। তুমি আজকে ধরো সাইক্লোন কিভাবে ড্যামেজ করেছে কোস্টাল এরিয়ায় সেটার জন্য তুমি স্টাডি করছো, ওয়ান স্টাডি। ওকে, এখানে খেয়াল করো, নাম্বার ওয়ান, এক নাম্বার স্টাডি করছো তুমি সাইক্লোনের উপরে ডেটা কালেক্ট করলা, সাইক্লোনের ড্যামেজের উপরে। ধরো আমফান চলে গিয়েছে, আমফান কিরকম ড্যামেজ করেছে তুমি ডেটা কালেক্ট করলা, এগুলোর উপরে তুমি ম্যাপ তৈরি করলা, ইনফরমেশন, এন্ড দেন সেই ইনফরমেশন থেকে তুমি কিছু রেজাল্ট পেলে, ইয়েস এই লোকেশনে আমার এত পরিমাণ ড্যামেজ হয়েছে। এন্ড দেন এটা গেল তোমার একটা সিঙ্গেল স্টাডি। এই সিঙ্গেল স্টাডির উপরে কিন্তু তুমি এখন ক্লেম করতে পারো না যে I became the expert in damage and loss assessment on cyclones. করতে পারবা? করা যাবে না, রাইট?
নো স্যার,
যাবে না। তুমি বলতে পারবে না যে I became the boss of this, আমি সবকিছু জেনে ফেলেছি, বলা যাবে না। বাট লেটস সে you have done multiple studies on cyclone related things. তুমি damage and loss assessment করেছো on আমফান, তুমি সিডরের উপরে কাজ করেছো, and then you have studied how the shelters should be. You have studied the on the storm surges কিরকম প্যাটার্ন ছিল সেগুলোর উপরে করেছো। সুন্দরবন কিভাবে রোল প্লে করছে in mitigating the effect or minimizing the effect of cyclones, কিভাবে physical barrier হিসেবে কাজ করছে। You have done multiple studies, okay, based on the cyclones. So cyclone related multiple studies তুমি করে ফেলেছো। এখন করে ফেলার পরে now you can say that okay, I have some knowledge on cyclone and Bangladesh. বুঝতে পেরেছো? অর্থাৎ কোস্টাল বেল্টের উপরে আমার কিছু নলেজ এখন তৈরি হয়েছে। কেন? কারণ তুমি যখন সাইক্লোন নিয়ে স্টাডি করতে গিয়েছো, you are not only talking about cyclone, you are also talking about how people behave, their livelihood, their socio-economic status, their socio-economic behaviors, okay, and the geography of it. তাই না? এই জিনিসগুলা তুমি তখন আস্তে আস্তে তোমার এক্সপেরিয়েন্স থেকে এবং তোমার স্টাডি থেকে, তোমার ডেটা থেকে তুমি এই জিনিসগুলো গ্যাদার করেছো। So that is knowledge. And based on this knowledge, now you are acting out. Now others, they rely on you. They ask you, okay, what should we do? How things should be done? So that is now you are able to give them the right answer or the appropriate answer or the answer that would be that can be applied and that could be the most fruitful one. So এটাই হচ্ছে তখন wisdom. ওকে, সো এখানে কোনো পলিসিতে যদি কোনো গ্যাপ থেকে যায় বা মিস কোনো কিছু করে যায়, সেটা আসলে ডেটার উপরে, সিঙ্গেল ডেটার উপরে ডিপেন্ড করে না। ওকে, সেটা ডিপেন্ড করে হচ্ছে উইজডমের উপরে। তার মানে যে ভদ্রলোক বা ভদ্র মহিলাকে আমরা হায়ার করেছি টু রাইট ডাউন দ্যাট পলিসি, they are not experienced enough or knowledgeable enough on that subject.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
All right. So,
স্যার এইটা কি স্যার মানে পার্সপেক্টিভের উপর অনেকটা ডিপেন্ড করে, যে উইজডমের কথা বলছিলেন যে মানে ওই নলেজটাকে কোন পার্সপেক্টিভে সে অ্যাপ্লাই করতেছে?
yes, so it also depends on the perspective. So এটাই যে পার্সপেক্টিভ যেটা পাচ্ছ তুমি, যে একটা ডিফারেন্ট অ্যাঙ্গেলে চিন্তা করার ক্ষমতা তুমি পাচ্ছ, সেটা কিন্তু তোমার ওই নলেজের উপরে বেস করেই যাচ্ছে, তাই না?
স্যার আমার একটা জিনিস জানার আছে স্যার। স্যার আমরা যদি ধর্মগুলা সম্বন্ধে বলি স্যার, তাহলে যদি স্যার আমি যদি ইমাজিন করি যে গড নেভার এক্সিস্টেড, তাহলে তো মানে প্রত্যেকটা ধর্মেরই হচ্ছে আমাদের মানে মানুষের কাছে আসছে হচ্ছে এক একজন হচ্ছে কোনো মানুষের মাধ্যমে, যেমন গৌতম বুদ্ধ বা হচ্ছে হযরত মুহাম্মদ সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লাম। তো স্যার তারা তো আসলে একটাই ছিল যে ম্যানকাইন্ড বা হচ্ছে একটা আদর্শ। তো তাদের তো মনে হয় উইজডমের মানে একটা উদাহরণ হতে পারে যে প্রত্যেকটা ধর্মগ্রন্থ, মানে আমি যদি বলি যে তাদের মানে ইটস আ রেজাল্ট অফ লং টার্ম মেডিটেশন এবং হচ্ছে স্যার মানে একটা উইজডমের হচ্ছে যে একটা বহিঃপ্রকাশ। কারণ তারা হচ্ছে সূক্ষ্মভাবে হচ্ছে মানুষের জীবন ধারণা, তারপর হচ্ছে এভিডেন্স হিসেবে বিভিন্ন যুদ্ধ বিগ্রহ বা হচ্ছে বিহেভিয়ারাল প্যাটার্ন, তারপর হচ্ছে এগুলোর ভিত্তি করে হচ্ছে একদম আলটিমেট লেভেলে হচ্ছে একটা নতুন জীবন ধারণা হচ্ছে প্রেরণ করছে, দ্যাট ইজ বিয়ন্ড দি ক্যাপাবিলিটি অফ নর্মাল নলেজ আর নর্মাল পিপল। সো ইট ক্যান ইট বি এক্সপ্লেইনড অ্যাজ উইজডম। কিন্তু চারজন কিন্তু চার রকমের, যেমন স্যার ইসলাম এক ধরনের, মোজেস ছিল একটা ইয়ে, তারপর হযরত মুহাম্মদ এক ধরনের ছিল, বুদ্ধ ছিল এক ধরনের। সো they are doing mankind in different way, different perspective.
So কোশ্চেনটা কি
স্যার এটা মানে ধর্ম যারা হচ্ছে আমাদের কাছে ধর্মগুলো ইন্ট্রোডিউস করছে, তারা কি আসলে উইজডমের পর্যায়ে পড়েন? তাদের জ্ঞানগুলো যেমন হযরত মুহাম্মদ সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লাম, তার যেই ক্যাপাবিলিটি, ইটস কাইন্ড অফ উইজডম, বাট সাহাবীদের ছিল না উইজডম, সাহাবীরা নলেজের পর্যায়ে আছে।
ইয়েস, এখন তাহলে প্রশ্নটা কি সেটাই বুঝতে পারছি না।
আমার প্রশ্ন হচ্ছে যে ইজ ইট ওকে যে স্যার মানে এই ফরমেশন যদি আমি সাজাই যে মানে উইজডম হচ্ছে যে সামথিং নিউ, আর তার থেকে একটু কম যারা জানে সেটা হচ্ছে নলেজ, বা নলেজ হচ্ছে একটা বাউন্ডারির মধ্যে, আর উইজডম হচ্ছে বিয়ন্ড দি বাউন্ডারি।
ওকে, অলরাইট। আসলে এটাকে বাউন্ডারির মধ্যে আর বিয়ন্ড দ্য বাউন্ডারি বলা যাবে না। আমি তোমার the example that you have drawn is very complicated one. ওকে, আমরা এখানে ধরো আমরা তো এখানে একটা স্টাডি করতে যাচ্ছি through some methodological process, and the example that you have drawn is based on it's not based on science, it's not based on any methodology, because the religion doesn't really follow any methodology. The religion is based on belief system. Okay, and in GIS you cannot rely on just belief, you have to prove it. It goes through some methods. Okay, it could be deductive or inductive, but it goes through some processes, and based on these processes you find an answer and you say that okay, so this is right, this is wrong. But in religion you cannot say that this is right or this is wrong. It's all about belief. If you believe that the God exists, you deep down in your heart you know that God exists. But if you believe that the God does not exist, you will always have doubt, no matter how many people say, no matter who says. Even let's say even the spirit of Gautam Buddha comes in front of you, or spirit of Jesus Christ comes in front of you and say that, oh, the human being, this is the true religion, still you will not believe in God because you do not believe it. Okay, তুমি এটা বিশ্বাস করো না। So it's a little bit different. It's a little bit complicated to answer your answer based on your example. However, I will try to answer it. So it's not beyond the limit. You see, so Gautam Buddha never said that there is a God. Okay, so Buddhism is based on sort of atheism. It says that there is no one is going to save you. You yourself have to save yourself. Your actions will give you reactions. Okay, so that's why many argues that it's not really a religion, it's rather a philosophy. So that's why I'm going to answer your question based on Gautam Buddha, because it's not really a religion, there is not really a God, so there is no chance that I am hurting someone's feelings, and there is no Buddhist in our class. So your sentiment won't be hurt or harmed in any way. So saying that, look in the life of Gautam Buddha, what he did. He left his, I always say jokingly to my peers and friends that Gautam Buddha was the one who actually enjoyed everything. Okay, he enjoyed his life to the fullest from every aspect. He was a prince, so enjoy it when everything has its peak. And when he reached to the peak, he got depressed. That is what I think. And then he left his home. And similar pattern you will see in the Western world. They have all the facilities. They enjoy it very much. They go for clubbing. They have boyfriends and girlfriends. They do drugs. They enjoy the alcohol. And at some point, they realize, what's the point of life? So they come to the East, they come to India, they go to China, and they go to monasteries and try to find some spirituality there. Okay, so that is what I say, going to the peak and coming down again. So then what happens? Then he goes to the world, he had multiple masters, he followed different techniques, and then at some time, he had an epiphany that the extremism is not good. Okay, the indulgence, full indulgence is not good. অর্থাৎ তুমি এক্সট্রিম পর্যায়ে তুমি একদম এটাকে কি বলে ফাস্ট করবা, তুমি কোনো কিছুই খাবা না বছরের পর বছর ধরে বা মাসের পর মাস ধরে. This is not really healthy, this is not good. And he also realized that okay, so extreme, এটা গেল extreme level, indulgence, সবকিছুর স্রোতে তুমি গা ভাসিয়ে দিলা. This is also not good. So what is the right way? Then he thought that okay, so middle way is the right way. আমি সবকিছুই করব অল্প অল্প করে. However, why are we not happy? Because we always have attachment. You are always clinging on the things. You are always fond of your mobile phone. You are fond of someone's. You cannot let go of your mother. You cannot let go of your partner. You cannot let go of your father. You cannot let go of your child. You cannot let go of your possessions. Okay, so having these attachments is the things what make you sad or unhappy. Because if your mother dies, you are unhappy. If your father passed away, you are unhappy. You are sad. Okay, ওই একটা গল্প আছে না যে সুখী মানুষের গল্প, তার কোনো জামা নাই. So having nothing, that means having no attachment, is the happiness. So that's what I think he preached, that do not own anything, do not make any attachment, do not keep any attachment. So attachment is what making you unhappy, is the is the obstacle of your to your path to the happiness. So now at the time, so many people were looking for the answers, looking for the happiness and so on, looking for God and etc. But he reached, based on the experiences, based on the knowledge, you see, he went through many sufferings, many masters, many practices. So all of these things together helped him to gather the knowledge, and based on his knowledge, then he started preaching a certain way of life. Okay, so that is his wisdom. Now if you come to Islam or any Abrahamic religion, I sensed a similar thing. If you think of Jesus Christ, he had to go through different sort of suffering, different phases of life. And based on his experiences or enlightenment, then he started to preach about a certain way of life or religion, which turned into a religion, okay, which is Christianity. So that is wisdom, yes. So they can have wisdom. And then his followers, they were instructed by this wise guy. And then time to time, there are some leaders come in. For example, in Buddhism, Dalai Lama. So Dalai Lama, you can say that he is wise as well, because sometimes you are lost. You do not have any, you do not know what to do. And then you go to one of his seminars, you ask him a question, and he gives an answer which is really, really makes sense or appropriate for you. Okay. Same is for maybe Sadhguru. So Sadhguru is a spiritual leader based in India. So if you have any question, you go to him, you ask him the question, and he will give you some answer which might be enlightening for you. So from that perspective, that is wisdom. For our perspective from GIS, the wisdom is when you are able to develop a policy which is quite sound, which is appropriate for everyone or the people involved. Eta ki answer dilo questioner?
Yes, sir. Clear, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. So,
স্যার আমার আরেকটা কোশ্চেন আছে
okay, yes.
স্যার জিআইএস এর ক্ষেত্রে কি স্যার ডেটাগুলো যেগুলো সেগুলো কি অলওয়েজ ইনফরমেশন লোকেশনাল বেসের কোনো ইনফরমেশন থাকতে হবে, মানে এটা কি লোকেশন বেসড হতে হবে ডাটাগুলো?
So in GIS there are yes they have to have some locational information, কারণ locational information যদি না থাকে সেই ক্ষেত্রে তো এটাকে আমরা GIS এ আসলে আনতে পারবো না। পারবো কি? I mean, whatever information, whatever data that you collect, you always collect its location. So that location could be specific coordinates, or that location could be based on some geographical or political boundary. Let's say তুমি মিরপুরের যেমন আমাদের এখন এই যে করোনা রোগী দেখা যাচ্ছে, তাই না? তো করোনা রোগীদের কিন্তু স্পেসিফিক বাসার যে অ্যাড্রেস সেটা কিন্তু আমরা পাচ্ছি না। আমরা পাচ্ছি কি ঢাকা শহরে এতগুলো হয়েছে। So it's giving the information which are based on some political boundary, that is Dhaka. Okay, political unit. So now what you can do, you can, এবং তুমি এই যে বিভিন্ন যে ম্যাপ দেখতে পাচ্ছ, জিআইএস এর ম্যাপ দেখা যাচ্ছে কোভিড-19 এর, তারপরে ড্যাশবোর্ড, জিআইএস এর ড্যাশবোর্ড অনেকে পাবলিশ করছে, আপডেটেড ম্যাপ। So all this information, they are talking about the distribution of COVID-19 based on different districts. So এখানেও দেখো কোভিড-19 কয়টা হয়েছে ঢাকায়, ধরো 1000 পেশেন্ট আছে। So you have 1000 patients of COVID-19, that is attribute information independent of location. And then you are saying, whenever you are saying Dhaka, now you are having this locational information. So since it has one specific information, that is Dhaka, now you can input the information in GIS. That means you can attach a locational information to it. আমার কথা কি বুঝতে পারলা? ক্লিয়ার হলো নাকি ক্লিয়ার হয়নি এখন?
জি স্যার বুঝে গেছে, না ক্লিয়ার এখন।
But let's say তুমি যখন জিডিপি স্টাডি করবা, so or if you do any economic study or poverty related study or dengue related study, ওই জায়গায় কিন্তু তখন আমরা আর লোকেশনকে নিয়ে আসছি না। We are talking about Dhaka, but we are not identifying the location of Dhaka. Okay, আমরা জাস্ট বলছি ঢাকায় আছে, ঢাকায় এই ধরনের এভারেজ ইনকাম, চিটং এই ধরনের এভারেজ ইনকাম এন্ড সো অন। সো ডেঙ্গুর ক্ষেত্রেও ঢাকায় অমুক ওয়ার্ড থেকে এতজন পেশেন্ট পাওয়া গিয়েছে, বাট নো ওয়ান ইজ রিয়েলি প্রেজেন্টিং দ্যাট ইনফরমেশন ইন জিআইএস অর ইন mapping format, cartographic sense. So that one is not GIS study thus. Okay, any other question? All right, so I'm moving on. So information of the world, how the things happen, or the information that is available in the world, that is the data that is available in the world, they can be broadly categorized, okay? And These categories could be based on form, like how the things look like. For example, the clouds. You have already studied different forms of clouds, right? Did you or not?
Yes, sir, we did.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So now can you identify which cloud is on the sky at this moment? Will you be able to?
Yes, sir.
Yes, hopefully, right? So
Sir, more or less, sir, we have forgot about some basics. We need to revise
yes, yes.
actually.
But if you can just quickly devise the course materials, you will be able to do it, completely, right? So that means you have that skill now.
Do it.
And by looking into the clouds, now you can say that, okay, so it's going to rain or not. Okay, even a person who didn't really study clouds or study the courses that you have gone through, he or she can also identify that it's going to rain or not by looking into the clouds. Now outside of my house, the clouds are white, and I know that there is no chance of rain. But then if they turn into start to turn into gray or becoming dark, then I could say that there's a chance of raining. Okay, so wherever you look into the form. Okay, and that is how you get the picture. So once upon a time, I mean, if you look into the horror films, what do you see? All these bad spirits or all these ghosts, they are always having, I don't know, very scary eyes, like white eyes, dark forms. Okay, or they are in some forms of dolls like Annabelle, or they are in some forms of spirits like the film Grudge, the Japanese film Grudge. Okay, and so on. They are always attacking from behind. They are always coming in front of you and then vanishing and then reappearing somewhere else, and so on. So all these pictures, you see, you cannot imagine the things that you haven't really seen. Okay, so what is the maximum, I mean, how scary, how, horrifying they can be. They could have horns, they could have tails instead of nose, etc. But the tail we have seen it from a cow or a dog or a cat or something, or a crocodile even. Okay, so that is what I'm trying to say. So everything you have in front of you, everything has specific forms. Okay, a door is always in a আয়তকৃতির ইংরেজি কি?
Rectangular.
Rectangular. Okay, so it's always rectangular. It's hardly, sometimes it may be square or maybe round, but a door, we know that it's a door because we go through it. Okay, a cloud which can give you rain and which cannot can be identified through the form. And the next interesting thing that we collect from our surroundings, you see, we are collecting the information on the form. Like say, when you go to a tree and you identify this is a mango tree by seeing its fruits, by seeing its leaves, by seeing the structure of it, by seeing the size of it. You know the mango tree can be a big one, right? But I don't know, compared to a rose plant, so the rose plant cannot be as huge as a mango tree. So you will never misclassify a rose plant as mango tree. So when you are out there collecting data, you are always, at first you are looking into the form of that entity, form of that substances. Okay, you're always looking into the water and you will say that this is water. You will never misclassify it as well or something else. So that is very important from our surroundings. Form. The first thing that we look into is form, and the second thing that we try to look into is the process, how things works. Okay, so let's say it's cloudy, the sky is cloudy, the clouds are dark, and then there is a strong wind blowing from north or south or somewhere else, from any direction. Okay, so you might say, based on this process, you could say that there might not be any rain. Why? Because the wind is carrying the clouds away to somewhere else. Okay, to a different direction, to a different location. So now, at first, you looked into the form and you said that, okay, there is a chance of raining. And then you looked into the process of it. You considered other parameters, other variables. Those are wind, those are humidity, those are the altitude of these clouds and the color of the clouds. And then you concluded that, okay, it's not going to rain because the wind is very strong and it's carrying the clouds away to somewhere else. And I can see there is light after the extent of these clouds. Okay, so ওই মেঘের পরে ওদিকে দেখা যাচ্ছে আলো, সো তার মানে মেঘটা ভেসে ভেসে আরেকটা জায়গায় চলে যাচ্ছে. So you know this process and you say that, okay, so there is not going to be any rain. So at the first place, you looked into the form and you said there is a chance of raining, and you looked into the process now. That means you are looking into more deeply, in depth, and then you are concluding that no, I was wrong. From the form, based on the process, there will not be any rain. There is a big chance of not having any rain. So same is for, let's say, landslide. You go to a place and you find very steep slope, okay, and then in that steep slope you say that there is a chance of landslide. And then you start looking around and you find that, okay, so the slope is very steep, but the quality of soil is very sticky. They can hold together, and you find lots of vegetation. Okay, in fact the steep is entirely covered with vegetation. And then you see rain falling, and you observe that rain is not really going through the soil. It's just running over the ground and going to the downhill. And then you start predicting that, okay, so there is a less chance of landslide because soil is not really getting wet, soil is not really getting loose. Okay, it's the roots of the plants, roots of the vegetation, they are holding the soil very strongly, and so on. So these things are these are the two information that we basically looked in our surroundings. Two information that we collect from the world. So what GIS does in these two categories or two information? So it brings all this information, okay, into a computer software. It forms a database based on this information. So what you do is you go to a place in a hilly area, you start collecting information of grasses based on how they form. That means how they looks like. You start collecting information on the vegetation. You start collecting the density of the vegetation, how dense they are. Are they dense or they are sparse? You start collecting on the soil quality. Okay, what type of soil is there? You start collecting the steep of the slope, the inclination of the slope. Okay, how steep they are they steep or not? You start collecting information on the permeability. Okay, whether the water they can penetrate through the soil or not. Okay, is the soil holding this water, or it's the water can run through the soil, and so on. So you gather all this information on the forms, and then form a database, and you try to develop a process. You try to observe the process of these forms in the software and try to predict based on their behaviors. Just like I said previously, yesterday, that based on the behavior of the the transformation of one land cover to another, no, I was talking about it in a different course, sorry. Or did I? আমি কি তোমাদেরকে ল্যান্ড কভার ট্রান্সফরমেশন নিয়ে কোনো কিছু বলেছি গতকালকে?
No sir.
বলিনি। ওকে সরি, আমি ওই যে রিস্ক মডেলিং দিয়ে গুলাই ফেলছিলাম মাস্টার্সের কোর্স। So based on the transformation, based on the behavioral trend, you can now predict what's going to happen. Will there be any landslide or not? Okay, so that's how GIS plays its role. So it brings all this information, these two information into a software, okay, apply its scientific knowledge of the user, and then do something, find out some evidence, find out some results, or try to predict a certain scenario based on the information gathered of these two. And now, when you talk about, you see, we talked about general scientific knowledge, right, in software. So now that leads us to the question of forms of general knowledge. So in the forms of general knowledge, the first thing we can do is we can talk about classification. So what is classification? So classifications are some sort of, some established rules that we follow to classify these forms or the processes. Okay, so how do we classify it? Let's say you go outside and you find that the surface is impervious. That means it's a solid surface. Okay, it's concrete. So you say that, okay, so this is concrete. It could be a road, all right, it could be a street, or it could be a house, a roof, or it could be a playground, let's say basketball ground. Okay, but all of them has some common characteristics of being impervious surface, and you identify it as impervious surface or urban area. Okay, and then you might go somewhere else and you could find there is water. Okay, so by considering the characteristics of or the presence of water, you might categorize those land covers, okay, those specific locations as water bodies. Now you say that, okay, so being only water bodies is not enough for me. I want to be more in detail. I want to be more precise. Okay, I want more detailed information. So I'm going to classify this water body class into multiple classes. So what do? You go and you say that, okay, is the water flowing? Is it always moving towards some direction? Then the answer is yes. You say, okay, so this could be a river. Okay, so you identify this as river. Or this could be a canal. You identify this as a canal. Okay, so you define that class as rivers and canals, or just rivers. Then the remaining waters, they are standstill. They do not flow. Okay, they are contained in some within a geographic boundary extent. So you define it as wetlands, for example. Okay, because the water is not really flowing visibly. You cannot feel the current. So you define it as wetland. You see? So based on some rules, based on some conditions, you try to classify the forms or the processes that we see. Okay, so the forms are being, is it water? Yes, it is water. So water bodies classification. And the process, is the water flowing? Yes, it is flowing. So that's river. Is the water flowing or standstill? The water is standstill in the process. So this is wetlands. In terms of urban areas, every impervious surface, you are saying that, okay, so they are urban areas. And then you go there and you ask questions. is there any vehicle on this impervious surface? You say yes. So that means this is road or street or highways, okay? And then this is not really any urban area. They are within urban area, but sometimes a highway is not in an urban area. It's outside of urban area. It's a connecting network. So based on the process, now you recategorize these entities into roads and highways. All right. And since the other things, other impervious surfaces, they do not have anything running on them, you say that, okay, so these are urban areas. These are buildings, these are houses, these are playgrounds inside urban area. And these are the structures that inside urban area. So you see how we are categorizing the forms, categorizing our, surrounding world based on forms and processes. So by doing this, we developed some set of rules. Okay, how can wetlands be used? How wilderness identified? That means now you have identified the wetlands, and based on the classification, now you actually set up some sort of rules that, okay, so the wetlands, they have to be preserved. Okay, they cannot be transformed into an urban area. So no, development company can come in and start developing on wetlands. They cannot build houses on wetlands, and so on. These sort of rules that you start to develop. And then another laws that are general knowledge that we talk about is laws. So in physics or in other subjects, the laws are some sort of set of behaviors that we talk about, like or theories that have turned into, that was proved and thus turned into laws. Let's say Newton's law of motion predicts the way in which all matter behave. Okay, সম্ভবত এটা সম্ভবত থার্ড ল, নিউটনের থার্ড ল মেবি, আমি ঠিক শিওর নই। So এই যে নিউটনের ফার্স্ট ল, সেকেন্ড ল, থার্ড ল, so these are law of physics. So he developed some theory and then he proved that theory and then they became law, and then everyone follows that law. Okay, and they follow it precisely to the very detail of multiple digits, multiple decimal digits, okay, etc. Whereas the geography laws are of much lower precision. In geography, we do not have to go into that much detail of physics. Okay, we can look into the problem from different scale. Like yesterday, no, এটাই কি আমাদের ফার্স্ট ক্লাস নাকি গতকালকে একটা ক্লাস হয়েছে? গতকালকে একটা ক্লাস হয়েছে, right? So yesterday when I was talking about your location, I was saying that, okay, so how can you define your location? You can say that, okay, I'm located at XY coordinates. But then we do not know where these XY coordinates are. We do not understand coordinates. So now you say that I'm at BUP. Okay. So BUP is sort of vague. It's not very precise because BUP has a certain boundary. So you can be anywhere in BUP. You can be in academic building at 3rd floor. You can be in admin building at 5th floor. You can be in multipurpose shed. You can be in Monpura Lake. You can be on the floating bridge. You can be at the gate of BUP. You can be at the daycare of BUP. Okay, so we cannot locate you precisely. All right, and in the next tier, in the next scale, you can say that, okay, I'm in Mirpur. I call you, where are you? And you say, I'm in Mirpur. So Mirpur is even larger area. So I do not really know, by listening, by hearing from you that you are in Mirpur, I cannot really identify your location. Okay, you can be anywhere in Mirpur. And then I call you from, let's say, abroad, and you tell me that you are in Dhaka. So Dhaka is Dhaka city itself is very big, I mean, compared to Mirpur. So I cannot really again identify you where you are, but looking into the map of Bangladesh, I know that you are in the capital, you are in Dhaka. So you see all these different scales or descriptions we are not really giving any precise information other than the XY coordinate. Even the XY coordinate could be very less precise. You can just say the latitude, longitude in degrees, which are very, very, less precise information. And then you can go and you say that some degree and some minute, which is still very less precise. And then you go and say that some degree and some second, and in the second, you only say the integer values. You do not say the floating points. You do not say all these fractional numbers. So that means still, it's not that precise. Then you tell me some fractional numbers, but you only mention of 2 places, 2 decimal places. So again, it is precise, quite precise, but not as precise as 6 fractional numbers or 6 decimal places or 7 decimal places or 10 decimal places and so on. Okay, the precision in geography, we use at different sets of precision when we talk about law. Okay, so what do we do with the GIS? So this one is a quick example of what you can do, and in this example, it says that let's say that you are working in a natural resource management, okay, and you have to work for a particular region. You see the region is in italic, so that means you have to work in a particular location within a geographic boundary. Okay, so this region could be a local government area, state, country, or anything. It could be Mirpur, it could be BUP, it could be Dhaka, entire Dhaka, it could be Dhaka district. So what do you have to do? Let's say you are working in Sundarban. So Sundarban is lying over multiple districts. And also it has transboundary distribution extent, because in India they also have Sundarbans. So you're working in Sundarban, and then the first thing that you have is you have the inventory. You have the database of available the information on vegetation, forest, and mineral resources. And you also obtain, the flora and fauna requirements, that is vegetation. You looked into the water and its quality. And then you also examine the different diseases to the flora and fauna, okay? And then also which resources are protected or in short supply, and so on, and how the resources are currently being exploited. So you look into this, you collect all this data for your study area, and then you try to predict how availability and quality of these resources will change in coming years. That could be 10 years, 20 years, or 100 years. Okay, and then you also doing so, you also try to assess the conflicts with the environment, quality of life, and the settlements. Okay, and you try to observe it through the visual observations, and as well as you try to find out from different maps, and then finally you try to quantify it. Let me hide this one so that you can see. So finally, what do? You try to comply with the local, regional, or national laws and legislations or regulations that is already in practice. So you can do all these things. So this could be a quick example. Another quick example could be you want to do a study of flood in, let's say, Haur area. So what do is you collect data on flood. You collect data of their occurrences, okay, and their duration, and so on. And based on this collected data, you can predict their occurrences, or which is known as return period of floods for 50 years, 20 years, or even 100 years return period. That means within this 100 years, how many times the flood could occur, or flooding could take place. You could also look into the livelihood, the changing livelihood of local people, local populace. And then you can also connect the flooding, the change of livelihood or the quality of livelihood with the climate change. So that means now you can say that how the climate change is actually influencing the flooding and thus influencing the alternation in lifestyle of the local people. Okay, and then you bring in how the local government is actually tackling the entire scenario, how the local government responds to the floods, to the flash floods or any kind of floods. Okay, and how the local governments are putting out incentives, or how they are helping the local people in what should I say it? In changing their lifestyle. Okay, how they are getting accustomed to the changes. So these sort of things. So in GIS, the study that I have just described, you can, by from the collection of data to the analysis part, you can, everything you can do in GIS. So while doing so, what do you need? So you will have to have access to, or you have to collect lots and lots of data. You have to have one really big database. You will be forming a big database. And then you have to have access to the different departments and agencies, be that government or non-government, because you have to know how they are behaving, how they are adapting, and how they are, helping the local people, and what other laws and legislations are. As well as to process all this data, you have to have access to different softwares and hardware. And you would need many experts or many personnel. So why personnel? Why not experts or users? Because some people will be just busy in writing reports. Some people will be just busy in collecting data. So in data collection, you do not really need much of expertise. But in analysis of this data or cleaning this data, you would be needing some, excuse me, some expertise. So you get all these things, and every information that you have collected or you got, now you put together in a software, and that is, or you put together in a framework, and that is what GIS is. Okay. So in fact, all this information that I described, okay, this case study, the natural resource management, that is what actually formed the first digital GIS in Canada. Okay, and it was formed by Roger Tomlinson. So you see, Roger Tomlinson. So Roger Tomlinson and his colleagues in early 60s, they actually tried to, their goal was to develop a natural resource inventory for Canada. Okay, and doing so, they formed a new framework. They formed a new system, and Roger Tomlinson called it GIS, Geographic Information System. And so that is the first time he coined the term GIS. And then they gave, sorry, what's that? And they gave it a name called Canada GIS. What's going on? Okay. All right. No problem. Okay, so where was I? So they found this agency, Canada Geographic Information System, in 1960s, and Roger Tomlinson coined the term GIS. Okay, so they worked for the government, and that's why Roger Tomlinson is known as father of GIS. However, so now the history is intertwined or connected with geography. Yesterday I told you that I might be talking about the quantitative history, quantitative regulation of geography and its effect on GIS, how it helped to form GIS. So in 1950s, at the middle of 1950s, there are some people in Washington University and other universities, such as Brian Berry. They started quantifying different problems, different geographic problems. And people were very critical of them. They were constantly criticizing that this is not really geography, this is part of mathematics, or this is part of statistics. But they were very firm on their idea that this is geography and we are doing quantitative geography. So in the late 50s, we have seen the revolution or the introduction of mathematics and statistics in solving geographical problems. So then 60s come in, and then Tomlinson and his team, his colleagues, they say that, okay, so we have lots of natural resources, but we do not really have any database for that. So why not we create an inventory of these natural resources? Let's call it, land inventory, Canada land inventory, or so on. So that they started collecting data. They started putting the data in. And then over the time, they realized, why don't we, analyze this information to see whether our landforms are degrading, or we are losing any natural resources, or if any natural resources are facing any sorts of threats. So they started analyzing all this collected data. So that's how, and they called it, the entire framework, they called it GIS. Okay, so that's how the GIS was born in the 1960s in Canada. Then US Bureau of Census, while they were doing census, they used GIS for the first time in 1960s. Okay, they called it dual independent map encoding. They used it for the first time, and they said that they saved a lot of money and manpower by using GIS. So eventually GIS started getting popular in US. Also, meanwhile, Harvard Laboratory for Computer Graphics, they started developing software. They tried to develop software. And you have to remember, it's not the present time. We did not have any AI or machine learning at the time, or our graphics were not as good as present day. And lots of programming programming languages were yet to be developed or encoded. So meanwhile, major vendors of present day, for example, Esri, Intergraph, they started popping up. They started their businesses. And in the late 1960s, or at the beginning of 1970s, in 1972, more specifically, Landsat satellite was launched. Okay, and it started giving out data. So the main purpose of sending satellites was to observe how the Earth's surface looks like. That was the sole purpose. But once we started getting all this data, we realized that we can do more than just looking onto the surface and try to find out the changes. We can do more. We can find out, we can identify different location of different natural resources. We can actually find out what's going on the surface, okay, from the sky. So understanding, having that epiphany or having that realization, that led to further development of GIS softwares and the practice of GIS. Okay, so that introduced the widespread use of GIS. So meanwhile, in 70s, the first academic conference named as AutoCarto took place, and multiple academicians, researchers, and practitioners of GIS, they attended in that conference, and then it was a boom. Okay, so then comes in 1980s, where the GIS software starts to become commercialized. Okay, and the first textbook was written by, I think it was written by Goodchild, if I'm not wrong, or someone else, I'm not really sure. Okay, and also we start to get these first global data sets. And then in 1994, Clinton signed or gave this executive order, which started to give public access to the Federal Special Data Infrastructure Depository. That means now the researchers, they have access to the federal special data, which were collected since 1950s. So remember, Landsat went on in 1970s. Sorry, in 1970s, it went up to the sky. It started giving data from 1972. But before that, the spy satellite, which is known as Corona, okay, CORONA. So that satellite Corona was collecting data in 1960s. So now this executive order gave access to the data of that satellite, data collected by that satellite. So still many researchers in different countries, they access this data and they study this data, which were from before the time of Landsat. Okay, so now you see you can analyze more than 70 years of data. So, and then in 2000, at the beginning of 2000, the internet became a very popular media. So people started, heavily relying on the internet, and then the web GIS was introduced, and people realized that, okay, so GIS, it's not only limited within a single software. It could be much more. It could be the results of GIS can be published and could be very interactive. Okay, published in an interactive way to the web, to the internet. And after some time, at the end of 2000 or at the beginning of 2010, people started to realize that, okay, why not keep everything, the entire GIS on the web, okay, including the software. So the parallel computing and all this technology were invented, and people start to realize that, okay, so working in a software, heavily working on a machine in a single computer, that GIS software would heavily rely on the power of that machine, power of that computer. Okay, what if we can transfer all these functionalities to a server where the parallel computing is going on, and then we can do much more through the internet? We will send the commands through the internet to that server, and the server will process every data, every function and everything, and it will send me back the result. Okay, so what if we do that? And that is now what we have through different platforms, like there are online or internet GIS software from Esri. So Esri is still continuing with ArcGIS. However, Esri is trying to take things to a different platform. I forgot the name of the softwares. Also, there are different softwares or platforms such as Google Earth Engine. So you do not really have to have a very powerful machine in your end. You can just have internet access and have some machine to type on, and then every process and everything will be done on the server's end, and you will get the result. So a summary of the timeline is given here. Okay, so I think the time is up. It's 1:30. We will continue from this slide from on next week. Does anyone have any question? Any question? Yes, জেমি তোমার নাম কি? আমি জামিন করে নাই জেমি করে তোমার নাম উচ্চারণ আমি ভুলে গিয়েছি, সরি। অনেকদিন তোমাকে ডাকা হয়।
জামি স্যার।
জামি, রাইট, সরি। সো জামি, তোমার অ্যাটেন্ডেন্স আমি চেষ্টা করব, বাট ওই যে যেটা বললাম ইউক্যামে তো আমাদের একদিন সময় থাকে, বাট আমি ইনস্ট্যান্টলি আমি ট্রাই করবো এই ক্লাসের পরে যদি দিতে পারি, দিতে না পারলাম, আর না হলে তুমি নোট রেখে দিও। ইউনিভার্সিটি যখন খুলবে আর যদি নাও খুলে সেমিস্টারের শেষের দিকে আমাকে তুমি ডেট এন্ড টাইম বলে দিলে আমি চেয়ারম্যান স্যারের কাছ থেকে পারমিশন নিয়ে ওইটা আমি দিয়ে দিলাম। ইউজুয়াল প্রসেস। আর যদি আমি দিতে পারি, ইফ আই হ্যাভ অ্যাক্সেস টু ইট, দেন ইটস super fine. Okay, any more question?
Hello sir. Hello.
Yes,
sir, আমাদের tools and techniques এ কি স্যার আমাদের কম্পিউটার দরকার হবে ইউজ করার?
টুলস এন্ড টেকনিক্স এর শুরুতে কম্পিউটার লাগবে না, শেষের দিকে যখন আমি টিউটোরিয়াল দিব তখন লাগতে পারে। আর যদি কম্পিউটারের অ্যাক্সেস না থাকে সেই ক্ষেত্রে সফটওয়্যারের অ্যাক্সেসও যদি না থাকে সেই ক্ষেত্রে যেটা করতে হবে যে টিউটোরিয়াল গুলোর পড়ে নিলেই আমার মনে হয় ব্যাপারগুলো বুঝতে পারবে। এন্ড দেন তারপরেও যদি বুঝতে না পারো সেই ক্ষেত্রে ওয়ারিড হওয়ার কিছু নাই। সেই ক্ষেত্রে তুমি এটা পরবর্তী সময়ে তুমি এটা প্র্যাকটিস করার জন্য সেভ করে রেখে দিতে পারো। আমি ওই টিউটোরিয়াল থেকে কতটুকু প্রশ্ন আসবে সেটা একটু ডাউটফুল আমি। ওকে, আমি তোমাকে তো আমি আর প্র্যাকটিক্যাল টেস্ট নিব না, আমি নিব থিওরিটিক্যাল কোশ্চেন এন্ড সিনারিও বেসড কোশ্চেন।
এই কোর্সের ক্ষেত্রে
সরি আরেকবার বলো।
বলছি এই কোর্সে কত মানে কখন কম্পিউটার লাগবে?
কোর্স কখন কমপ্লিট হবে বলতে?
জিআইএস কোর্সে কখন কম্পিউটার লাগবে? আমরা যখন এই
সো জিআইএস কোর্সেও সেম, শেষের দিকে আমি তোমাদেরকে সফটওয়্যারের সাথে ইন্ট্রোডিউস করে দেওয়ার জন্য, গতকালকের ক্লাসে আমি ডিসকাস করেছি এটা, সফটওয়্যারের সাথে ইন্ট্রোডিউস করে দেওয়ার জন্য আমি তখন হয়তো কম্পিউটার লাগতে পারে। বাট তোমার যদি অ্যাক্সেস না থাকে আই থিংক ইউ উড বি ফাইন অ্যাজ ওয়েল, বিকজ ইউ উইল অলওয়েজ হ্যাভ অ্যাক্সেস টু দিস ভিডিওস। সো আমি যখন দেখাবো তখন তুমি ভিডিও দেখেই আসলে আইডিয়া পেতে পারো আর কি। এন্ড দেন তারপরে তোমার যখন কম্পিউটার অ্যাক্সেস পাবা তখন প্র্যাকটিস করে নিও নিজে নিজে।
আচ্ছা, ধন্যবাদ।
ওকে, থ্যাংক ইউ।